So every year, right, the Indian budget gets announced, and it's suddenly everywhere, on the news, all over social media. But for most of us, we're kind of left scratching our heads wondering, okay, but what does this actually mean for me? Well, today, we're going to decode it all. The first thing we all think about is pretty simple: our wallet. Are things about to get more expensive? Is my monthly budget going to change? It's the most immediate concern, for sure. And then, right after that, comes the big one: taxes. Am I going to have more money in my pocket at the end of the month or less? It's a question that hits our payslip directly. Really, all of this just boils down to one single question. In this explainer, we're going to break down the Indian budget into simple, easy to understand language so that you know exactly how it affects your money. Let's start with a really simple way to think about this. The best way to get your head around the national budget is to imagine it's just like your own household budget. Seriously, the idea is exactly the same. It's just on a mind-bogglingly massive scale. I mean, just look at this comparison. In your home, you have money coming in, that's your income. You have money going out, your expenses, and hopefully you've got some savings. Well, the government does the exact same thing. It has income from stuff like taxes, it has expenses for public services, and it makes investments for the country's future. It really is just a giant financial plan for the whole nation. So let's follow the money. First up, the income side of the equation. Where does the government even get all of this cash to run the country? And this is where it gets pretty interesting. Check out where the biggest chunks of money are coming from. A huge piece of the pie is from GST. That's the tax we pay on almost everything we buy. Then you've got corporate taxes from companies, and of course, our own personal income taxes. Oh, and you'll notice borrowing in there too. That's basically the government taking out loans to help pay for everything. So literally, every rupee we spend or earn helps fill up this national pot. Okay, so once the government knows what's coming in, the next big question is, how are we going to spend it? This part is fascinating because it's like a roadmap to the government's biggest priorities for the whole year. And this chart gives us a really clear snapshot of those priorities. You can see right away that a huge amount is being spent on infrastructure. We're talking roads, bridges, all that good stuff. After that, you've got major spending in areas like defense, healthcare, education, and all sorts of welfare programs. The size of these bars tells you exactly where the focus is. All right, we've got the basics down. Now let's get to the part you've been waiting for. How does all of this high-level national planning actually trickle down and affect you, me, and our wallets? It pretty much happens in 4 key ways. First, taxes. Any change to the tax rules directly impacts how much salary you take home. Second, prices. Changes in customs or excise duties can make things like electronics or cars cheaper or more expensive. Third, jobs. When the government spends a ton on infrastructure, for example, that can create a lot of new jobs. And finally, your savings and investments. The budget can send signals that move the stock market and influence interest rates. Now, because of all these big impacts, you've got financial experts and major investors watching the budget announcement like it's the World Cup final. They're on the lookout for very specific clues about where the economy is heading. So what are they actually looking for? Well, they're digging into a few key things on this list. One is something called capital expenditure. That's just a fancy term for spending that builds stuff for the future, like a new port or highway. Another big one is the fiscal deficit. Think of that like the country's credit card bill. It's the gap between what the government earns and what it spends. A smaller deficit is a sign of good financial health. And that brings us to a really crucial idea that experts always talk about. They're trying to figure out if the budget is focused on long-term growth, planting trees for the future, or if it's more about short-term freebies that just offer a quick fix. A really strong budget is always about building a solid foundation for the years ahead. So, with all this information buzzing around, what's the one thing, the single most important takeaway for your own financial plan? What do you absolutely need to remember when the budget news hits? Pay close attention to this. This is the key to cutting through all the noise that surrounds the budget every single year. On budget day, the stock market might go wild. It might shoot up, it might crash down. That's a classic short-term reaction. But here's the secret. Smart, long-term investors don't panic. They know that a single budget, just one day out of 365, doesn't change the fundamental long-term journey of creating wealth. Your financial strategy has to be bigger than one day's news cycle. So let's do a quick recap. We figured out that the budget is just the country's big financial plan. It matters because it shows us what the government's priorities are, and it affects us directly through our taxes, the prices we pay, job opportunities, and our long-term investments. And that really leaves us with one final thought. Look, the budget is going to change every single year, but your financial goals, they probably won't. So the real question to ask yourself is this: have you built a financial plan that's strong enough to last for the long run, way beyond the headlines of any single budget?